It has been 95 years since Asheville's first water treatment plant began piping water into homes and businesses across the city.
And today, some say that aging infrastructure and a lack of maintenance through the decades is to blame for the recent water crisis.
News 13's Karen Zach-Kalak continues our investigation with a look back at how our water system has been managed and if the massive outage could have been prevented.
So this is the last of the last case that we had.
There are just a few bottles left of the water that Brenda Lilly survived on for 5 straight days.
It is a nightmare. It is a disgrace that our government is not taking care of us that way.
As an Asheville native, she says she grew up hearing horror stories about constant problems with the city's water system.
The history of the water in Asheville is kind of notorious. I mean, there's myth and lore around it.
And while she still has a lot of questions about how 38,000 people like herself could completely lose water for so many days, she's certain about one thing. She believes the crisis could have been prevented by better maintenance throughout the years.
This was not an act of God. This was an act of somebody's decision-making.
Decisions that could date back to 1928 when the first water treatment plant, Beatree, came online. Since then, the city has added the North Fork and Mills River plants. The network now includes more than 1,700 miles of distribution lines with a capacity of 27 million gallons of water. The city admits that Asheville's mountainous terrain is a challenge, and the elevation difference creates enormous pressure, which can lead to more breaks and leaks.
The fact that these pipes failed was not surprising.
It's not surprising. We were made to use plastic pipe and inferior fittings, and all that is coming back.
A former water department employee who didn't want to be identified worked for the city in the 80s. He said a tight budget back then led to cheap fixes, creating an unreliable network from the plants to the pipes.
I think the ghosts of the past and now the present have come forth to haunt us. Years of neglect and poor management.
It wasn't properly mapped during the 1930s and 40s and 50s.
Russ Martin is also familiar with the department's past. He was the city's mayor in the 90s and was key in bringing on the Mills River plant to add more capacity.
Through the decades, do you feel like the water system, the infrastructure has been funded appropriately?
I can't answer that. I suspect it has, but I'm not aware of everything.
He stands by the management of the water department, saying they do a good job despite the challenges.
So you don't think it was the fault of anyone?
No. It was no one's fault. It was a force of nature that occurred.
According to the State Division of Water Resources, in 1997, most of the pipes were made of cast iron with 20% galvanized iron and just 10% ductile iron, what's viewed as the industry standard. In the most recent report in 2021, about a third of the city's pipes are now ductile iron, but almost half are still cast iron, a material that breaks easier. We also learned that the water department has a yearly budget of about $40 million, with about a third spent on operating costs, and on average, 28,000 feet of distribution lines are replaced each year. In addition, there's a capital improvement program to repair and update the infrastructure. Over the last 6 years, the city has spent an average of $16 million annually on capital investments. Most of that money has gone to water production projects and neighborhood water line replacement projects. And for the next 5 years, $73 million is planned, including the $20 million in grants to rehabilitate the Mills River plant. The rest of the money will be spent on things like small water line replacement, meter and vault repair, and water treatment plant projects.
The investments are infrastructure. Some's plant, some's distribution. It's spread throughout the system.
Director of Water Resources David Melton says in addition to the bigger projects, the City of Asheville Water Resources staff continually maintains an extensive and complicated water infrastructure system. These maintenance inspections occur on a daily basis.
We do what we call neighborhood enhancement projects, and those are primarily pipe replacement projects and all the appurtenances that go along with that, hydrants, valves, everything that makes the distribution system work.
But after the recent outage, even the mayor admitted the water system is not in the condition it should be.
And so it is fair to say that for a period of years, and I see some nodding of those who know this history, the system was not properly maintained, and And so we're playing a lot of catch up.
For people like Lily, it's not a question of whether mistakes were made, but why and how they will be fixed.
You have to have an infrastructure that works. It's that simple. And obviously, something is amiss or this wouldn't have happened.
Karen Zatkalak, News 13.
Our investigation continues tomorrow night at 6.
I talked to business owners about their profits that dried up when the water did and whether they will be getting any financial help to recover.
New details tonight on a plea deal for a man who kidnapped and sexually assaulted multiple young girls. We are hearing from both his family and the family of one of the victims.
News 13's Hannah McKenzie was in the courtroom today as the man learned he will spend at least the next 2 decades in prison.
Colton Sprinkle appearing remorseful in court Wednesday. Sprinkle apologizing to his victims and their families.
Facing 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, Colton Lynn Sprinkle taking a plea deal Wednesday.
It's hard to look at myself in the mirror. I'm so sorry to the parents, to the victims, to my parents, my family.
The 23-year-old pleading guilty to 6 lesser felony charges, including first-degree kidnapping and indecent liberties with a minor. According to the prosecution, Sprinkle sexually assaulted 3 girls, the victims between the ages of 13 and 15.
My daughter was the first to be reported. Through investigating, they were able to find the other 2 victims that occurred in the delayed investigation that it took for them to do something.
Sprinkle will spend at least the next 2 decades in prison, his sentencing between 20 and 29 years. One of the victims' fathers telling us they're at peace with the outcome, considering the circumstances.
It's very difficult to try these kinds of cases because the victims have to be brought into it. Most of them are not even reported. The ones that are reported are not prosecuted. The ones that are prosecuted get very little time, if any. It's a win for not only our family, but for our community to know that our district attorney is now taking these cases more serious than before the last election cycle.
DA Todd Williams commenting briefly.
This is what our office is focused on, trying to ensure public safety.
Roger Brian Sprinkle hadn't seen his son since he was arrested in November 2021, knowing he won't be released until he's at least 43, not sitting well.
He didn't deserve that, and my son wouldn't hurt a flea. He's a gentle giant.
But your son met these girls on Snapchat, and he told them that he was younger than what he was.
I have no idea about none of that.
His family says he was raised in the church and served in the Marines for a few months.
I do hope one day be a good person and be a law-abiding citizen. I'm so sorry. I truly am.
Sorries aside, the victims and their families now focusing on healing.
Do you feel in a way that not only your daughter but others have been failed by the system?
I know they have.
In addition to his prison sentence, Sprinkle must also register as a sex offender for at least the next 30 years. He's also not permitted to contact any of his 3 victims.
And new at 5:30, a grant totaling tens of thousands of dollars is in the pipeline to help Haywood County with COVID vaccinations.
As News 13's Rex Hodge reports, commissioners have now put the grant on hold after hearing concerns from anti-vaxxers in the community.
The $75,000 grant from the state to Haywood County is designed to increase access to the COVID vaccine. But some anti-vaxxers showed up at the most recent commissioners meeting saying they don't want grant money going in that direction.
I'm not asking, but pleading with you not to take any more money to help promote this COVID vaccine.
Haywood County Republican Party Chairwoman Kay Miller among 4 residents who argued against the grant, believing the vaccine creates health problems and government funding is an intrusion into individual rights.
And they even mention in this about school-based vaccination, which makes me crazy.
Well, I'm very concerned about the focus on children. I'm concerned about parental rights.
The vaccine has been proven to be very harmful to the reproductive organs of our young children.
Barry Pepin also claiming the vaccine disrupts EKG rhythms of pilots.
3 days ago, I think the FAA dismissed that as a concern.
I took their concerns to Haywood County's medical director, Mark Jabin.
Any validity to any of them?
Virtually none of those concerns have actually panned out in the real world to be concerns. None of the pregnancy and fertility concerns that were had.
Commission Chair Kevin Ensley explains the purpose of the grant.
The grant was primarily going to be used by our health department to help supplement the salaries and some supplies that we had used to contact and let people know, what they can do to get the vaccine if they would like.
The effort, Ensley says, is especially focused on reaching the underserved. But with resident concerns and questions from board members, addressing the grant was put on hold.
To pause and learn more to be sure they make the best decision possible. It's a responsible thing for them to do.
But Jabin says getting the vaccine far outweighs not getting it.
The risk of death is 6 times lower than for someone unvaccinated. To be able to say that the vaccines aren't effective is just to ignore things that are right out there in front of you.
Ensley says the grant, with more detail explaining it, will be considered again by the board when it meets on February 6th.